Hey guys, Clint here. Back in the shop this morning. I'm getting ready to start carving the throat and tip on a new powder horn. Thought I'd share it with you. Let's get started. So by carving, I'm not talking about engraving. I'm talking about using files and rasp to reduce the mass at the front of the horn and create a raised ring that will be used for the front strap retention, like on this horn. When we think about the golden age of powder horns and those classically engraved horns of the French and Indian War and the American Revolution, these horns almost always had hand-carved throats and tips on them. I feel like it's important to acknowledge that in the same time period that we have hand-carved powder horns, we also have shop-made horns. These are horns of the trade that are coming out of shops in places like Philadelphia. These horns required very specialized tools to make. You had to have a lathe, you had to have chasing tools, but anybody with a few simple hand tools, files, rasp, knife, could carve a basic powder horn. So a couple of things I've already done to this horn to get us to this point is the tip has been cut off and the spout hole drilled. The base has been trimmed and rounded using heat and then squared up. And I've got our throat and tip laid out according to the golden ratio. So we've got separate videos on accomplishing all of those steps. So if you need help with any of that, please check out those other videos. We would really appreciate it if you give this video a like and subscribe to our channel. One thing I do want to share is in the comments on my last video, someone asked about how I drew that line around the horn and got it straight. I did that by taking one of my turned rings and simply slipping it over the horn and tracing around it. Anything like that would work. You could even use a section of paper towel roll and slide it down over the horn. You just need to find something that fits the position of the horn where you want it to be. A hose clamp, a piece of paper towel roll, So let's get started with the carving. The first thing I'm going to do is use masking tape to mark off my throat. You guys will notice throughout this video that I use a lot of masking tape in my work. And I do that really for two reasons. One, it's an easy way to lay out a straight line around the horn, and it kind of establishes a border. And it also protects the areas of the horn that I don't want to hit with the file or rasp yet. So there we are, we're all taped up. I've got where the step down is going to begin and the back of the raised ring. I'm going to begin by cutting a shallow groove all the way around the horn, right where the step throat is to begin. I want to be careful here and not go all the way through the horn. This is just to establish the line. In this case, I'm using a small fret saw used by instrument builders. You could also use a hacksaw to accomplish the same task. I just prefer the fret saw. I'm going to repeat this step at the back of the throat. Again, cutting a small groove all the way around the horn. This can be accomplished on a sandbag or by using a post and vise to secure the horn. So now that I've got both lines cut in, I'm going to use a half round file to go ahead and open both those lines up a little bit so that I can get in there with a little more aggressive tool. In both instances, I'm using the flat side of the file against the throat and then the flat side against the raised collar. So I've got both those lines cut in with the file. You can see that the line here at the collar is a lot deeper than the line back here at the step throat. And part of the reason for that is understanding the internal anatomy of the horn. Of course, the thinnest part of the horn is down here at the base. But as we move forward in the horn body, the wall thickness increases until we eventually get to the end of the cavity where it stops, and then the horn is solid from that point on. This is a piece of horn that I split in half so we could see. So right there is where we would cut it off, and we've drilled our spout hole. And then I've kind of drawn on there what we're hoping to accomplish as we carve this, with this kind of being our step. Notice that we're not going to remove material in a uniform manner. We're actually going to be removing more material as we get closer to the tip. And it's part of the reason that we start back here at the throat and work forward, is that if we started out here at the tip and work back, we could actually remove so much material up here that to get this line to continue, we would have to get down into the hollow or the cavity of the horn, and we want to avoid that. Something else we want to consider while we're carving the powder horn is that if we look at a powder horn from the base to the tip, it's a nice gradual flow. And there is a set of lines here that keep your eye moving, that go from the base to the tip. When we're carving, we want to do our best to try to maintain that flow from the base to the tip. One of the biggest mistakes I see people make when they're carving a powder horn is they take a lot of material off at the step, and they take a lot of material off at the collar, and they don't take material off in between. And what happens is you wind up with a very flat spot on the inside curve of the horn and a big hump on the back of the throat, and it disrupts that line. So you don't get that gradual flow from the base to the tip. In my opinion, it's the difference between a well-carved powder horn and one that's not so well carved. We'll try to avoid that. So for about the next hour or two, I'm going to use a 4-in-1 file, and I'm going to start removing material at the throat and working toward the back of the collar. It's not an exciting process, but I'll show you as much of it as I can. So one of the things I'll often do while I'm carving is just stop and hold the horn up to the light and look at that, the flow that I talked about. And what I'm really looking for is humps and flats that break that continuous flow of the line. So I'll usually try to go ahead and mark those with a Sharpie. And usually it's high spots where I need to take more material off of. It just helps me. Sometimes you have to step away from the bench to be able to see this. It works for me. As I'm getting close to being finished, I've switched over to kind of a finer half round file, just to get rid of some of the really big scratches. I'm not going to do too much as far as cleanup goes on the throat right now. A little bit of cleanup lets us see that line a whole lot better if we've got high spots or low spots. But we might have to come back and hit the throat again after we start carving on the tip. So I'm not going to go crazy with the cleanup there. We'll get to that later. All right, so we're getting really close there. Still probably going to have to come back and do a little bit of removal, but right now I think we need to jump ahead of the collar and work the tip down so that we can connect these two lines to each other. And then the last thing we'll do is shape the collar. Here again, I'm using a strip of tape as a layout tool. I have about a 3/8 wide piece that I'm wrapping around the horn to establish where the front of the collar and the back of the tip will be located. So as you get the front of the collar firmly established, it can sometimes be helpful to take the tape off and look at what's going on. We want this line to flow under the collar and right out the tip. I've still got to come down the front of the tip a little bit more and actually back here at the collar, but I can see some issues where I've got like a dip right here, which means I'm going to have to take a little material off here to make this line flow better, but I don't want to address any of that until I've got this tip down where it needs to be. So I'm going to finish filing this out first. All right, so we're getting there. Still a little bit more file work to do back here. But I think before I go on to the next step, one thing, this raised ring is very oval. And that just has to do with the natural thickness of the horn. It's higher on the sides right now than it is on the top and the bottom. So I'm going to go ahead and file that round. From this point on, we're really starting to refine things. We're going to work slower with finer tools to get the lines just like we want. A little 60 grit sandpaper can help get all that shiny off, so that everything's kind of the same dull texture. It makes it easier to see. All right, well, we're getting close. I had said that was going to take an hour or two. It's been closer to 3 or 4. I'm going to take a break and go eat some lunch. And when I come back, we will split the ring and panel the spout. See you in a few. All right, I'm back from lunch, cooled off, refreshed, ready to go to the next step on this horn. So that next step for us is going to be splitting the ring. Right now our ring is pretty wide at about 3/8 of an inch. We're going to use a fairly aggressive rat tail file followed by a small chainsaw file. You can draw a line around the center of this band if that's helpful to you. But if you go slow, you should be able to eyeball it. I'm just taking shortcuts to start with, trying to keep it centered in the raised ring. As you get all the way around, you can start getting a little faster with it. And then as I get close to being finished, I use the chainsaw file to kind of smooth everything up. Make sure the two bands are about the same width. I'm going to try to anticipate a couple of questions here. One being, how deep do you go? And that's really a matter of personal preference. For me, I like the bottom of that kind of U-shaped channel to be just about in line with the line of the horn. So taking it right down to the point where this actually looks like two raised rings sitting on the horn. How do you know if you're even all the way around? Well, besides eyeballing it, one of the things I do is as I'm filing with that final file, I'm letting my finger right on top of the file and just touch the rings. And so when I'm filling the ring pretty consistently all the way around, I know I'm at a pretty much a uniform depth. Hope that helps. Another thing I want to touch on, I don't know if you can see those really bad scratch marks right down the back of the throat right there. It's where my rat tail file jumped out of the groove when I was filing that notch and I hit the throat. Do the same thing on the tips. It's one of the reasons I go ahead and split this ring before I do any cleanup or finishing of the throat or any paneling of the spout, because there's a high tendency that you're going to slip and hit those things. And if you've already done all your finish work, then you have to do it again. All right, here's our ring split, all finished up. All right, let's panel the spout. The number of panels that you put on the spout is really a matter of personal choice. I typically apply 8, but I've seen as few as 4 and as many as 12 on original horns. I start by using a Sharpie to divide the spout in half. Then I cut both of those halves in half and then divide those quarters into half again. This gives me 8 flats. Before I start filing those tips, I'm going to use a little bit of our premium horn stain to darken the tip. This will allow me to see very clearly where my file's cutting. Just so you know my strategy, I'm going to file the top and bottom flats first and get those parallel with each other. Then I'll do the right and left flats the same way, and then I'll come back and get the ones in the middle. I think with the stain on there, you're going to really be able to see where the file's cutting and understand what I'm doing. So now with 4 flats filed, I'll go back and file the ones in between. So something else that you really want to watch for as you're filing those flats is making sure that your spout hole stays centered in the end of your horn. It's really easy to get aggressive on one of the flats and get a thin spot if you're not careful. The trick is to go slow, check often, take your time. All right, I'm going to do a quick cleanup with the scraper, and I think we'll be ready to call this throat and tip finished. Well, it is the end of a long day, and I am hot, tired, sweaty, but there is our hand-carved throat and spout all finished up. I added some color because I think it helps the detail show up a little bit. There's still a long way to go on this horn. I need to taper the spout hole. I need to make a base plug and install it. I need to clean the body up and do the final coloration on this horn as well as the antiquing. But those are all subjects for future videos. I hope you found something in this video that was useful to you. Please give the video a like. We really would appreciate it if you would subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching, and as always, keep the fire burning. Now for the fun part.